So we continue today with the second part of the Shon review Shon Vayeshev and on the Yonim of Chanuka. Yesterday, just a brief review. Yesterday, we discovered that the situation that the Torah considers this parsha to be definitive of, which is Choshech, because Miketz is called the Ketz, Sam LaChoshech, and the human condition is intimately related to that Choshech. That we found is the mokher really of a very primal holiday that starts essentially in the first year after the Girush from Gan Eden. It's the first experience that Adam has with the failure of light in the world. And this becomes subsequently a holiday, which becomes the Saturnalia, which becomes the Christian Christmas, and which relates to the nature of Choshech, which is Yavan, and the Or, which is Chanuka, and is deeply part of our actual experience as human beings, something that we don't really appreciate sufficiently, which would mean that this parsha, being part of this sefer, which is in its most essential self, which is the whole introduction that Rashi gives to the sefer, to the Torah as a whole, that this is the description of what it takes to create a human species that is rolling in some fashion to be the Adam that was meant to be fashioned in Gan Eden, the Adam that can give the answer to Nasa Adam as a question, the Adam that can give a question, an answer to the question of something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is unable to answer, which remains an open question until it's the actual result of that question. And that this sefer itself ends essentially when this Choshech is addressed, which means that it's very, very much part of the whole concept of our schus to Yisrael itself. I think you're causing the camera to shake, so if you just put it on the other table. And so in understanding the parsha, we understand in a very deep way, if we're zeichet to understand, we understand something about ourselves, we understand something about the nature of Yisrael as Adam Atem. Now, that understanding something about Yisrael happens to be, as we identified, the main problem in this parsha. This parsha is essentially the closing chapter, almost. Obviously, it's a closing chapter, hasn't yet closed, but it's the closing chapter in the story of Vayeshev, of the nature of the Choshech that comes from Gidan Hashem. The reason I say that is because that is where we have the sudden change in the way that Yaakov Avinu relates to the world. Therein stems all of his fears, his inability to act, what we perceive as almost a withdrawal from the leadership of Yisrael. And that itself was the question of how it is possible to achieve an integration of the two shemas that was given as a result of the Gidan Hashem, which is triggered with the Vayivater Yaakov Adol, his encounter with a primal Choshech. So there he was alone, needed to confront himself, needed to confront his place in the world, needed to confront the Sarah Shalais of all the different Pirushim and what that confrontation was. And essentially, they're all different faces of a very profound confrontation, which led him to understand that he himself was not integrated sufficiently. The Zohar says that was whatever it was he struggled with, exposed. And that which was exposed was essentially, as the one who tells us, that it was a davar shalach b'Yaakov and afal b'Yisrael. That impact on the particular human being, Yaakov, became a definitive question in the nature of Israel. It happens to be that that's not just an example of something that affects Yaakov and that then moves on into Yisrael, but rather it represents the primal problem of the interrelationship between Yaakov and Yisrael. And that's clearly what happens at that moment where he insists on getting that Shinui Hashem in the Parsha, which he's given that Shem twice, which becomes part of the Tzaka Gadol Amara, which Esav is also, in a sense, he battles the absolute rights of Yisrael to those brachos and becomes a force throughout history, which comes to basically challenge what it is that Yisrael has achieved in Gidanosha, meaning how is it that he has really integrated two completely different elements of life. This sounds very esoteric, but as I pointed out, it's something that we struggle with, each and every one of us. Probably it's our most essential struggle. And then certainly every Ben Yisrael. And every human being, in terms of the difference between the Yitziras Adam, the Yitzri, and the Yotzri, that is the simplest expression of this idea, where an individual feels that he's meant to be more as a human being, and that he is somehow capable of a connectedness to having his head in the stars and to being the finest expression and vindication of what the entire universe, what creation is all about. And that, of course, is our dream of Rashis and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's dream of Rashis and what it was for. It was Bishvil. And the realities of our day-to-day life, which seems to contradict, first of all, our sense of significance. But in this case, here, it's our sense of translation. Our visions of ourselves and our visions of what the world is about and what our place is within it is lost in translation. And that translation from the thought into the reality of the bottommost nature of the things that we face is just shocking to us, because we can, in 1 second, be on a madrega of tremendous kedusha and tahira and avas Hashem, and a second later, you're attacked by lotatruach, and it's as if you're the most prosper guy in the world, which is the nature of Nisyonos all along. When it talks about Rabbi Akiva being misleitz, it's an ovre avera, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches him a lesson. He ends up climbing a tree to catch a girl on the top of the tree. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing. So this is what the Satan says to him, If it wouldn't be that Min HaShamayim, they protect you, you wouldn't be worth 2 cents. I could turn you into a piece of garbage. 2 cents you wouldn't be worth. That translation, certainly a problem that comes to us with such shock. I mean, how do we lose track of ourselves in that one instant? Of course, that is an expression of a deeper question. It's not just the being overpowered by the reptilian drives of a moment. The issue is, does there exist a translation of the entire vision into activity within the Olam, such that it isn't necessary for me to lose myself every single time that I'm faced with something as simple as how to speak to another human being, how to deal with my family, how to deal with my business, and how to deal with the needs that are in front of me. Now, this was the issues that Yaakov Avinu faced over here in a very primal way. The bikush of shalva that he had was the sense that he had achieved something for himself as Yisrael, and that everything that destroys that was the things that were happening here within this parsha. And we saw that the parsha, therefore, is not simply a description of a descent into darkness, but is a description of all of the lowest possible natures that come out in the darkness of whatever human being is, that could end up being in the darkness of what lies beneath Yisrael. And wherever there was a failure here in the parsha, it becomes the expression of the nature of Golus itself. And to such an extent that we find remuzim of every different aspect of what is about to come, which is the Emach HaShecha Gedol and Nofeles. And those are the things that are merumas here in various gematrias in the presence of malachim that are talking sort of outside on the stage, and the planning of a Chanuka, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Chevron, and all kinds of strange things that we don't understand. Why are they presented dafka as part of this darkness? And how is it that we have all of the hachanas for Google, and that the way Chazal puts the whole thing is that nobody knows what's going on, and the only body that's interested in getting something serious achieved over here is me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm also busy. You guys are all busy. But I know the way you're busy. Your insane thoughts. I'm the only one who knows what's going on over here. So that in the most powerful way, the one person that we found is actually makabel on himself a shlichus from Yisrael Mama. And that one moment at the beginning where Yaakov and Yisrael become integrated, and in which Yosef is integrated along with the Elotoldos Yaakov Yosef, is where there's a hachana for a tremendous shlichus to achieve shalom. And it's obvious that that shlichus had nothing to do with find out how they're doing, because every day another brother was coming back. Three Mashamish is over, the same Rashi that says that. So wait till they come, you'll find out how they're doing. It's ridiculous. You need a whole hachana for that, you know. What are you saying? I think this is what needs to be done. Yes, Hineni, okay, then let's do it. It was an unbelievable portion. So we understood that that was an actual attempt by those who sensed that they knew where the flow of things were going, and the desire to express those dreams as a reality, that the brothers would be mishtatef, and in so much is what comes out at the end, in which they finally do recognize that, on the contrary, the thing they want the most is the shleimus of Yaakov Avinu and the Bnei Rachel and so on. It's there where we get that integration that comes out of this parsha in the Beit Lechem Yehuda from the story of Peretz in the end, when they're mocking Rachel to Leah in there, in Beit Lechem itself. Hashem Isha Abba B'tach Beitecha Kirach Eloch Leah. The Medrash is unbelievable. This is Ziknei Yehuda that is saying that. How is that possible? All of that comes from this addressing that shalom. And here the most unbelievable thing. For a issue that only comes out, and obviously this is the only issue that we really know about Yosef, which is a clear-cut failure. The issue that comes out is Zokrim. Remember me. Talk about me to power. That's the only issue in which we find a failure in power, in Moshe, in Yosef here. That means the insertion of any type of a not realistic response to what needs to be done for the hour. Was that an Aveda? Was that necessary? Did that make the Gili Kochamayim greater? It was a Hishtadlis that added what? Percentages? First of all, it didn't. And if it did, is that what we're doing here? We're playing percentage games? That the chances of his remembering you is, well, 1% greater if you say it. And if it's going to obviously either come up or it's not going to come up. He's not going to sit there and talk to Paro about you. You're crazy. The Sarah Mashkim is going to go and say, oh, Paro, by the way, what's wrong with you? It's insane. So obviously the entire thing is only where an opportunity is going to come up. So what are you saying? And what are you doing then? So in other words, there's this irresistible human need to somehow or other take over the nature of the events in the universe, which even the flow, that's the meat of Yisod, even the flow itself, that's the nature of Mazel, as the Zohar points out. That's the Nizila, which is used in modern terms in psychology. The Jew knows how to flow, which is supposedly the most expressive and natural way in which he becomes himself. Somehow or other, he too is blind to what's going on, and the amazing blindness that is brought out and the constant voices off stage give us that the sense of darkness being itself the makor of everything that happens, and yet that Kate Sam L'Choshech being central to what is going to come out in terms of the Rs, if it's built into the nature of things. So that the Yaakov Ubanav Yordu Mitzrayim, which is the next case, becomes the next book, Shmos. And somehow or other we were left challenged with the understanding of how in the world does this cause Ma'asav Gidla Amo, when we seem to be defining the entire future by a human being who is blind to everything around him. And the first step that we saw was that this attempt to deal with the Vayivater Yaakov Levado, which ends up being the Giran Masha, is actually parallel to a V'nizkav Hashem Levado. We understood that those are basically two ends of the same problem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's being alone is V'nizkav. Yaakov's being alone is Vayivater. The difference between them is obvious. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is alone, he's stuck in the heavens, so to speak. When Yaakov Avinu is alone, he's stuck on the earth. Now the problem is, what's the interconnection between them? But that's the Giran Hashem problem. So basically, Yaakov Avinu's inability to translate the Yisrael, which is Lamala, Mekisi Yaakov, that should be the Niskav Hashem Lavada, into what it means to be a Yaakov, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's problem to Vayochel, in being Elohei HaShamayim, in which he's incapable of finding a mokum for himself on the earth. That mokum, of course, ultimately becomes a mokum Yivchar Hashem, becomes the Beis HaMikdash, what it was that Yaakov Avinu was initially addressing. The reason that all Churban is traced to the Gid HaNashe, which according to the Zohar is actually Tisha B'Av. The reason that Et Gid HaNashe comes to be Mar Tisha B'Av, and the reason that the Achila V'Shtia of after the sale of Yosef was essentially eating and drinking on Tisha B'Av. And Kol Oicha V'Shaisa on Tisha B'Av is Ein Orah B'Nechama. And that's exactly what was happening over here, because it all comes from the same issue. Your inability to translate those dreams into realities that can move other people is Yaakov's inability to translate his dreams into a life where he successfully creates that bayit that comes to Beitel. Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's inability to successfully translate Ma'aseh Bereshis into the Ma'aseh V'Ikid B'Yamo B'Shil Yisrael Sheni Bereshis, because they're not going anywhere. And there's nothing that he can do about that. And that's built into the nature of that choshech. And therefore, we find that the questions that are being addressed throughout are the way in which the Torah provides for us the possibility of actually answering the breakdown between the V'niskav Hashem Levada and V'yivaseh Yaakov Levada, which means that the two holidays that end up readdressing what it means to have a regal without a break in the Gid HaNashe, which is a nerve problem, which is essentially the main idea, because nerves are malachim. This we talked about yesterday, malachim. They are simply carriers of instructions. And a breakdown wasn't a breakdown in a muscle, wasn't a breakdown in a tendon, it was a breakdown in a nerve to Gid HaNashe. So it's a sciatic nerve which carries, as the Gemara says, it carries the possibilities, it breaks up into the nerves that go to the genitals, so therefore it's fundamental to reproduction and to Yosef, and to Yisod. And it makes it impossible for you to fully function within the world, and therefore destroys the Ela Todot Yaakov Yosef, which we came to understand the Ketonet Apasim, and the way in which he was encouraging Yosef, was he was utilizing Yosef as his own solution to, I can't do it, but I can become Yosef, and Yosef can become me. And that's Kol Mash, that's exactly the inyanim that Rashi is Maramis to Kol Mash Karala Yaakov, Karala Yosef, and that the whole Iker told us, of course, that flow of reproductive power, which is obviously not what Goyim call reproductive power, but what is gradually has become understood, is the fundamental drives that are translated from every last interrelationship of any force in the world to being able to relate it back to its makar, which is where, as civilization attempts to get closer and closer to an understanding of the interrelationship of forces, it's necessary to get closer and closer to the instant of the Big Bang when those forces are essentially integrated, and therefore mathematically you can handle the breakdowns that we see in forces, which essentially break down the Gid HaNashe. Therefore, ultimately, the inability to stand on the earth, which is essentially the koach of gravity, is not integrated with the other forces. And there seems to be this breakdown, and what we're doing is spending literally billions and billions of dollars every single year across the earth to get a little bit closer to finding out how are those forces actually one. But that means that on the level of human civilization, we are challenged by that same breakdown. The vision that we have of what is existence, how is it expressed in a physical universe, what does it really come from, still escapes us. And as long as it escapes us, we are desperate to do whatever is necessary to find that next piece. In terms of what the Torah is looking for here, is exactly that solution within the context of the nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bria itself. Therefore, in the end, the significance turns out to be the two independent holidays, which cannot be provided for by the Torah. And that's Dafka Chanuka Upurim, which is Keneged Neitzach HaHod, and that, according to Zohar, is the essential breakdown, and it's Keneged the thighs, and elements of the reproductive system, and now are part of what it is that we address. And as we saw yesterday, we saw that those two holidays are linked in the Torah in very profound ways, so that the Neres of Zechariah, which revolve around Zerubbabel, which is the beginning of Purim, and Shoshana Birah, become in the end Chen Chenla, the Yesod of the bias. That's finally the real bias. And there we need to have the Shar Shushan to integrate Vani Shoshana Birah of Nehemiah himself, which is an amazing kind of thing in which the Kabbalistic elements are presaged in the actual words of the Torah, so we can understand that we're dealing with the gradual development of two different levels of, and as we'll see, I'm not going to talk about it now, but in Hashem we'll talk about it on Sunday. We have the Chanuka share, two different levels that are very, very parallel to the development of science in the 20th century, the 21st century. Those two levels, one is Purim and one is Chanuka, and that becomes the only possible tikkun in terms of the physical universe, and we'll see how it works into the relationship that we have with the life as we know it. And that means that the idea of Yosef's attempt to deal with this in terms of vulnerability and taking himself out of the equation, which we related to as a sort of James Bond kind of issue in the latest James Bond, which is giving himself over with the absolute vulnerability and taking on Yisrael's dream and exposing himself as that, was insufficient because of the fact that at the end of the parsha he says Ki'im Zachartani. That Ki'im Zachartani meant that the brothers could not perceive him as a reality. In the same way that we instantly know that somebody has plans, and we stay away from them. And the more you talk about your grand ideas and so on, the more we turn the other way. It has become a deeper and deeper appreciation of humanity, that the people that you cannot trust are the people with the ideas and the people with the plans and the people that are telling you exactly how it's going to work and what, and that's exactly what you detected. And in the end, it's because of that Yehuda is able to crack Yosef, as the Medrash points out. The Vayigash love Yehuda comes out on top of that. Most people don't understand it, don't see it. But what happens in the end is that the only tikkun that we have of yours as we understood can only come through a parsha that is extraordinarily raw on every level. And therefore, I mean, even the Gemara questions whether we should even read this parsha publicly. There's so many issues in it that are so disturbing, so unfit for children to hear, and so on. I mean, the whole thing leaves us, if you read this parsha, you actually come out with the feeling of, these weren't good people. This is the idea of God. These are terrible people. You think that I understand, okay, we could try to answer, Yaakov, wasn't really as phony as he looked, and so on. Okay. I understand that's Akabam, and that's something about the Akevosha Esav. I can handle one person like that, but not that the entire Klal Yisrael should be built of these horrible people. I mean, what are we being the firefighters for? People that can go and kill their brother and then sit down and have a nice meal and celebrate. I mean, it's very, very disturbing, of course, and everybody is bothered by that, so that the rawness of the emotions, the rawness of the responses, and the rawness of the sexuality, all of those things bother us and clearly are meant to be deeply interrelated, because if you're going to have an integration of a Yisrael with a Yaakov, by definition, it's got to get out on the street. It's got to be completely able to deal with the things that are out there. So that as long as the brothers were convinced that there was an aspect of infatuation that was involved with Yaakov, then that infatuation became indeed an infatuation that became their own infatuation, remarkably. They figured Yaakov can handle it. And it was only after they recognized that it had nothing to do with infatuation. It had to do with this translation. We're privy to that fact because we know about the shlichus in Yisrael of Yosef and Ishmael. He wasn't given a chance to present that shlichus, but we understand that obviously it means if he was willing to risk Yosef in this fashion. That he understood what was involved and that he needed to basically make that bond move. You think that, this is what I care about more than anything else because I happen to have this psychological anger, Okay, so here it is. What do you want to do with it? Which is exactly what Yosef presents them with in next week's parsha. Do you still live with psychological anger? First, let me bring out to you how much your brother Binyamin is a disgusting replica of his mother. Look at this. He stole it, just like his mother did. Couldn't resist. Now you understand what kind of kid he is? Okay, so I'm going to keep him. Why don't you go back, b'shalom, to your father, Your father, who you said loves you. I understand it, but we all know what those type of relationships are. Get over it. This isn't real. And that's the instant that everything goes completely crazy. But you would have loses it. What are you talking about? How can you talk like this? What's the matter with you? Are you insane? Your own infatuations you're going to use to translate into this? The whole thing is amazingly Mida forces them to recognize what it is that they're looking at. So because you're convinced that I want Binyamin as a sex story, as Rashi points out. So because of this, now the original issue of Yosef as sex story, son is passé, it's all the same, right? So how come you're fighting? I don't get it. And of course, that's when everything becomes exactly clear. We're talking about something real. And that reality strips all of these other visions and makes them something else. It's amazing how this whole story, the Bikesh Yaakov Vayeshev B'Shalva, the idea of what it takes to be able to get out of that. Now you have to get back to the street in order to take glory, which of course this is Chanuka, is all about hope. You took your passion initially and you lost the passion. Now it all became about what you've already achieved. What happened to the connection? What happened to that contact? It's amazing that this is a movie. This is the story of Rocky 3. It's exactly that story. So here is a guy that he's Zocha already to the title. There's some Meshuggah, Mr. T, is claiming he's the best. The guy doesn't want to fight me. Who cares about him, right? All right, so finally, okay, he's gonna be Makabo. No, but first it wasn't.
Because he was going to retire.
Yeah, he wants to retire. He's already won the ship. He wants to retire. So his hachana is such a joke. Such a joke. He's not ready to put himself into it. There's like a circus. And the trader makes fun of him. What are we going to make a circus act? With sugar, you sit there. Everything's about self-time. You're gonna sit in the middle of all these kids running around selling Rocky shirts. And you're gonna be doing your hachanas for the fight of your life. I mean, there's no way that such a thing can work out, right? And unbelievably, what happens in the end is exactly the most astonishing change in which the person who had hated him totally, right, was Makana connected him, which was the original world champion, his creed, right, his original world champion, falls in love with Rocky. Comes to him and says, listen, for both of us, you have to defeat this guy. I know what you're shy to be. And you're not being that way. You're not doing what you need to do. And I'm telling you where we're going to go. We're going to go back to the streets. I'm going to take you to the filthy places where I grew up and the filthy gyms that you can barely breathe and they smell so bad. And that's where we're going. And that's where you're going to start, back on the street. And then you'll become yourself, right? What is that? Amazing. What is that? The eye of the tiger. Why is it the eye of the tiger? That's having Az connection. Right? So the Azus of Namer is Kabbalistically Kanoz, which becomes Chanuka, which becomes Pinchas, which becomes the way in which something is real. That's the point. The tiger, the Azus of the tiger is, don't try to play any games with me. Try to imagine what it looks like when you're looking at that and that tiger's coming at you. You know, this is not a kitty. This is not a lion that you can play games with, you know, and you can make friends with and so on. This is a tiger. And that tiger sees, this is what I want, this is the reality. No amount of levushim are going to get anything away from me. And that's the incredible power of that azus. And this is what Creed defines them. That's what you need. And this is what you have to go out and get. Yeah, I copied the song, the words from the song. It was mamish. It says, I'm rising back up. I'm back on the street. You know? And so many times it happens too fast. That's mamish this Fornos trap. It just happened too fast. They lost control. That's what Ruvain was trying to do, was trying to make it, look, let's just throw him in the bar. Not that there was any use throwing. Let's not let it happen too fast, because once you lose control of the events, they're out of your hands. Put them in a bar. Right? You trade your passion for glory. This is the opposite of it. Don't lose your grip on the dreams of the past. You must fight just to keep them alive. It's the eye of the tiger. You have to hang tough. You have to stay hungry. That is exactly what the Bikesh Leishev B'Shalva doesn't do. It's already all there. Now we can sell Yaakov Avinu shirts. It's great. It's an amazing thing. This week's Parsha, they offered the T-shirt of the tiger of Rocky for sale. Yeah. This is like front page news. That's Stallone's shirt. That was the idea of the eye of the tiger, with the tiger on the back. You can buy it. On auction. So weird. So many years later, on this a movie from the 80s, or the 70s. I don't know when it was. Unbelievable.
Very sad about the tiger that comes with the gut. What?
Yeah.
Because of the
No.
of the gut.
Yeah, these things, huh?
It was because of the azut of the gut.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, that's the klal, the interrelationship between species. Amazing. So, I mean, what was initially a battling of infatuation, battling of ideas that they thought, the more that they saw things from a point of view that was itself distanced from the reality of the view, and that allowed for even the smallest input of oneself and one's ideas into that reality. The most horrific thing happens over here, of course, in which they discover religion. And this we'll talk about now tonight in the extension of those ideas. We started discussing it, and we pointed out many times. But here we've been aiming on something more profound. That is that Dotan is actually identified by the Medrash, and as what Gabriel is telling you, that this is going to be the end. In other words, as you move, and Meir Simcha pointed out, that, look, he could have said at this point, I wasn't supposed to deal with this, because Yaakov Avinu only sent me to Shem, which is actually a perversion of the Shlifas, because he was not supposed to be searching for his brothers. He was supposed to be searching for the nature of brotherhood. By the way, Rocky takes place in Philadelphia. Which is it's the strangest place to follow a movie like that. The whole thing takes place in Philadelphia. Anyway, brotherly love, that's what it means. So the fact that the Malach tells him, as the Zohar says, listen, you are to'eh bakol, you don't understand. It's not that you're to'eh about where they are. You're to'eh in everything that you're doing. You have a completely wrong understanding of how this shrifus could possibly work out. It's not going to work out. Because these people are not the achim that you think you're looking for. So that the focus on the physicality of something, as opposed to what is missing in the idea that I need to achieve, that destroyed the shlifus, really. And so, instead, what we get is a strange word called Datan. And that becomes the city of Dat, which, as Rashi says, the end result of that is they are going to destroy themselves with their thinking. And they are first, on you, And in the end, Vayitnachal, that's how they became. So they became warped, they became perverted, they became funnies. And all of it was supported by this house of cards, which was a place. A place that you create for yourself, and that's what we're going to discuss today, which became Dotan. Now, Hanukkah, we know, is not simply the idea of Choshech and Yov and Emaisa Bereshis and in these parshas and so on, but it is also the at least penultimate stage of Geula, Chinuka for the nature of Geula. And because of that, what we sing, we like in Neirot the most, Sur, goes through every single one of those goals as if they are all interrelated and connected somehow to the vision of the Or of Hanukkah and the getting away from that Choshech. We traced back initially the Choshech here to the Choshech that comes from Gan Eden itself. Because it's a simple enough idea. Tell me if I haven't explained it enough. That first Geniza of the Or in Gan Eden, in which the Or Agonus was only Mishamish until the end of Shabbos in Gan Eden, those 36 hours which Hanukkah tends to recreate, is the problem of the Gilanosh. It's the problem of this parsha. Very simply, the reason is because if you're dealing with Or as we know Or, then that Or and Choshech have to be completely separated. They cannot be Mishtamish B'Yeruvudia, and that's one of the levels of the interpretation by Yara or the Einon Mishtamish B'Yeruvudia. The confusion that comes from the Shimush B'Yeruvudia is very simple. It's the entire unique edition. It's the confusion that we have. And why do we have confusion? Because why was it no problem when it was Ganuz in Shimush B'Yeruvudia, as the Rishonim point out? As long as it was the Aragonus, there was no problem. So during that time, it was indeed, how come that's not damaging? It's very simple. The nature of Or as we know it is only a metaphor to the nature of Or as it's meant in the Torah initially before the creation of the sun and the moon and so on. It's not a reference, as Chazal pointed out, to the light that we use. But the light that we use is a metaphorical connection to that light. What is its metaphor? Its metaphor is that it provides us with a connection to the thing outside of us because it's a carrier of information. But the horrific nature of that carrier of information is that the information that it carries, by definition, is only information when a conscious mind processes it. So information and processing are intimately related, even in terms of the mathematical definitions of information. We can't talk about information if it isn't related to the ability to process that information. But processing introduces something between the whatever it is that is being carried and the person who sees it. So you don't really see anything at all. Your brain sees what you've processed about information coming in, but and this is of course our biggest problem. We have absolutely no idea what the universe consists of. Because no matter what it consists of, the very fact that complexity contrives to provide a decoder of information for the simple reason that without that decoder, survival is impossible and therefore there cannot be any information. So this is part of the whole strange reality of the universe, that the only thing that's important in it is the output of information. And that output of information means that it can only survive if there's a decoder. So therefore, any planet will achieve a decoder, whether that decoder is a bacteria that is able to move away from this particular thing, will sense this type of chemical that's going to be dangerous for its survival. If it requires light, then it'll be sensitive to light. If it requires radio frequency, magnetism, whatever decoding it needs in order to survive, becomes, by definition, what it is, because that is the nature of that information. But obviously, its vision, so to speak, utilizing that input, is going to simply be a little screen that it builds for itself, which enables the organism to respond. As far as how comfortable it feels, or the more deep sense of what consciousness means, which we could say simply means what it feels like as an experience to be me. What does it feel like to be the organism that I am? So obviously, to whatever extent it's functioning as an organism, there is some internal picture, as primitive as it is, that allows that interrelationship of organic whole to exist. And it's going to have to be comfortable with that in order to survive. But that has nothing to do with what is really going on. I, as a bacteria, may only be sensitive to magnetism and heat. Maybe I don't know anything about the rest of the spectrum, right? I don't know anything. So the ability to relate to the universe as it is without the organos is FS. We can just postulate that there's some type of interrelationship, but we don't even know that we're even talking about the same thing when I'm guessing at what it feels like to be you. So I'm assuming it feels to be you, similar to the way it feels to be me. I have no reason to really think that. I don't know that you perceive the color green as the way I think the color green. Maybe you would see it as red. What do I know? I mean, there'd be no test that could possibly allow us to know those differences. Therefore, if I have an or, which became gonos, that allows me to experience the thing, then by definition, that thing will never be limited to any specific entity. It allows me to see what the universe is like, and therefore, by definition, it has to go me so far, not so far. It has to be the universe. Either I perceive it in its entirety, and the way its entirety is embedded in every last element, or I perceive nothing. But once I get rid of that, then I'm left with basically a metaphor. The point, however, of that metaphor is that because of the decoding process, I can never connect what is with what it is, that the experience of what is. That's the problem of the Giradosha. I may have an idea about what reality is like, but in terms of my own experience of that reality, it's as if I put myself in between. And that's exactly what Yosef did. That's exactly what the brothers did. They put their own definitions of what was happening and how it was necessary to handle it and how it affected them and how they experienced it. We look at it and say, but that's crazy. But it's not crazy at all. It's a direct response to the fact that Choshech now becomes a challenge instead of part of the nature of the Gilui of the universe, which of course is exactly what it is. All of the complexity that we see as a result of that struggle with Choshech in terms of entropic forces. And so we'll see there's more to it than that, of course. But I'm saying even physically. So the definition of life and development and data as we see it is, even in our terms, part of a struggle between non-being and being, or between areas where there's low energy, high entropy, and not enough energy available to do anything and to generate new information, and areas in the universe that have free energy that allows the development of this complexity, which is what it's all about. Right? So that means that the moment that that's there, I can no longer perceive what is now. Surprisingly, Chazal described that as a breakdown in terms of Adam's perception, the same breakdown that occurs in Kabbalah Satira. And that was Kafuyei Tova and Kafuyei Tova. Now, it's not immediately clear to us what the heck the Kafuyei Tova has to do with the issue at all. right? Especially when the Gemara proves it. How do we know that we're creator Tovah? Because we didn't say Atatute, because we didn't want to be Makir Tovah. Says, I mean, so what's wrong with that? I feel very much the burden of thanking God all the time. I'd rather achieve it myself. I mean, I thought that's the way it's supposed to be. You know? So obviously, however we're going to understand it, it represents the achievement of Korach Ma'aseh in the end, which is what we're looking for. How do I know that? Because the three dargas of Korach Ma'aseh Higid La'amah, and the Higadati Hayom L'Hashem Elokecha Kibati Al Haaretz at the end, which goes through the Haggadah Shel Pesach, end with Higadati Hayom, with an insane comment that Sifrei makes, and Rashi says it's a simple pshat in the pasuk, that when you're saying Higadati Hayom to the Kohen, what you're saying is, I am not Kafui Tovah. You're not saying I'm grateful. You're not saying you're saying I am not Kafui Tovah. And that is crazy. Unless that indeed was the primal issue that was keeping us from Yerushas Haaretz, and relates exactly to the same primal breakdown of Gid Anosha and its equivalent in the breakdown between the Aragonas and the Aras we have. Chanuka is Lahodot Ulahalel. That was the entire teaching. It's the mocker of all of the dinim of Hallel. In becoming that, it's obvious that it's addressing as that penultimate step that we spoke about in terms of Moses' soul. It's addressing that issue. It's teaching that it is possible to become yourself in the context of this breakdown and not to be damaged by the Kriyetova, the Ne-Kriyetova. The sense that the people have in our parsha of being chess pieces that end up being played with is exactly the problem of Kriyat Tova. If Adam Arishan says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, maybe I want to get married, but I don't want to find myself on a board with a person that you create for me. That's ridiculous. I mean, I thought it's supposed to be my game. Isn't this, you keep telling me it's, B'shvilcha, kol ma shebarasi b'shvilcha barasi, for heaven's sake, let it be my life. This is not my life. These guys and voices off stage. How am I supposed to live my life? Yehuda's coming on and said, the Malach tells me where I'm supposed to go sleep with Tamar. And then I meet a Malach who tells me to go to Dotan. I'm very confused. The deepest sense of being a chess piece is this thing, right? That difficulty of translating a Maaseh Bereshis that was meant to culminate into an Adam that was able to be Makir B'Tovat Yishamim, as Rashi says. Ulitparel. This is the essence of the Avda V'Lashama, which is the recreation of a Beis Hamikdash that is functional for Aveda of Chanuka. Rashi's words for that Adam is, Lo haya Adam lahakir b'tovat ha'yeshamim. So that means when we're looking for the formation of a human consciousness that can become part of a universe in which his own awareness is what allows it to reign. And of course, that reign is a violation, essentially, of entropy, instead of it being a mist, as we pointed out. That's the whole idea of the Ananim and so on. That difficulty of bringing the world to be conscious of itself and to recognize that that is itself and is not something external and is not a voice that is coming from off stage is, by definition, the recreation of the Arabans. Because it means that now I can see Misof Olam Atzofa, essentially. Whereas before, all I could see was like there's something unique about my life, my plans, and the little piece of the action that I have in terms of time space, and the absurdity of struggling with the meaninglessness in a universe of so many billions of years, the absurdity of a couple of years of conscious life on some silly rock and trying to make something out of that is such an incredible joke that it can only be answered by something that is not part of that silly life. And that silly life, of course, what Einstein called an optical delusion. It doesn't exist anyway. In what sense are you separate? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Your DNA was entirely defined by billions of years and an infinity of exploding stars and multiple generations of materials generated in those stars. And the information that's there has nothing to do with you. And you're saying you have a life? A life of what? A vector for information? And it's what kind of life is that? All the other stuff is just silly. That's just to enable you to survive, which was exactly what the aura provides after the breakout of the organoids. I need information to survive, so I eat information. So I make that information my own. Of course, it's a delusion. And yet, this is the Yaakov problem translating Yisrael. In other words, Yisrael is essentially the DNA. Yaakov is the vector. Yeah, how do I put those things together? It's exactly the problem that we have with our own lives. So evolution fools us into depositing our genes and spending our life taking care of children and changing diapers and so on and so forth. Who needs it? But where is my life in all of that? This is that problem of translating the vision of reality into something that can be your life without standing in any way in contradiction to the nature of the entirety of the vision that provided you your life. It was unbelievable. Well, how does that happen? And there's a deeper problem. The deeper problem is this. The Maharal's brilliant explanation of the nature of Kafale and Harchigigit means that it's impossible to deal with this problem. Because the Maharal understands that what it means to say Kafale and Harchigigit, obviously it doesn't mean Hakadosh Baruch Hu picks up a mountain, but what is that meant to say? It means that existentially, the awareness of the fact that there really is no choice. How could I possibly, what would I do? What future is there to me? What future is there to creation? Whether to say God, no. And what will you do for the rest of your life? Go to gym? Play golf? What will you do? You don't have a chance of doing anything. Who could possibly live like that? What would it mean? It's insane. Nobody could say no, you think? So that Kafale Harchigigit is simply the recognition of such a powerful fundamental reality that it becomes, in my mind, forced upon me. Because it's so real, what am I going to do about it? The problem is, we understood that the entire issue here in the Parsha is the recognition that the things that you had described as infatuations, interpretations, are actually real. Once you understand that they're actually real, you're ready to die for them. And what the Maharal is saying is exactly the opposite. The more you understand it's real, the more resentful you are of that reality, because it doesn't allow you any wiggling room. So how exactly was that supposed to trigger bris that's supposed to be full of love, that's supposed to be full of appreciation, supposed to be a full expression of this is me, if in fact it causes you to see the entire thing is kafa, which becomes kviyatova. Kviyatova we thought meant a refusal to recognize reality. So how in the world could be a refusal to recognize reality which is based entirely on the fact that you're seeing it as reality? It's crazy, right? So there's something fundamentally wrong with the entire issue. Either you do see it as reality, in which case, great, so it's real. And if you don't see it as a reality, then there's no kafiyah. There's no kafiyah markagigas, because the kafiyah only came from the depth of my appreciation of its existential factuality. Nothing to do about it. No way to change my need to take the Torah. And the truth is, of course, that Kof Aleim Har Chagigis, to someone who doesn't have the problem of Kriyat Tova, is the most wonderful thing in the world. The proof is that the Goyim say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, well, you heard Kof Aleim Har Chagigis. Of course, it's the entire point. It wasn't Kof Aleim Har Chagigis because they don't perceive it as reality. So it's going to be Kof Aleim Har Chagigis. I offered it to you. You said no. You said, what does it say? Great. What does it say? And you already know the answer. So why are we talking about this? But what that means is that it demands of you a certain ability to perceive that reality. Now, to someone who doesn't have the problem of Kriyat Tova, which cannot therefore mean the unwillingness to perceive reality, because then it won't be Kriyat Tova. It's most true. Okay.
For the Myers.
Before my.
Yeah.
Very nice. Hopefully we'll be able to have fires afterwards. I think I only made one. I thought we'd finish in an hour. We quite finished. So, to someone who recognizes that reality and doesn't have a problem with the breakdown of his own relationship to it, that's wonderful. Kof Aleim Har Chagigis. Why? Because if you don't have Kof Aleim Har Chagigis, then you've got a big problem with Kabbalas HaTorah. The problem is, and this is how the Maharal explains it, the problem is that you think it's up to you. But if you think it's up to you, then it's entirely personal. But if it's not entirely personal, then it isn't reality. So how do you get around that problem? You get around that problem by saying yes, and then, oh my God! That's exactly the point. So then, once you perceive it as you understand that your yes was predicated on a deep recognition, perhaps subliminal, but a deep recognition that this is me. Whereas otherwise, you would always suspect, gosh, it's probably some kind of religious nonsense. But like this, you can't suspect that anymore. So Kof Aleim Har Chagigis is not the essence of Kriyat Tova, it's the response to the Kof Aleim Har Chagigis, and that's where we were stumped. Where could there be alternatives in the response? And here is the brilliant solution to the entire frustration that we have with the multiple realities that seem to exist side by side in Klal Yisrael. When we're saying that you can perceive Kof Aleim Har Chagigis, it means that that's what Yisrael is capable of. The Umayyad were not capable of that, right? They didn't see. That's what they say, Yisrael is capable of seeing that. Now, the question is, how do you react to it? You cannot deny that profound existential need that you have for Torah. But, and the same thing is true about reality as a whole, you may be capable of perceiving reality, but you are challenged by something else. In the perception of reality, you perceive a loss of the delusional self that you have, and you're committed to that delusional self. That's Kriyat Tova. I find Tova to be bending me out of shape. That's literally what it means, Kriyat Tova. It's bending me out of shape. I'm not comfortable with it. The modern word, I'm not comfortable. All the modern Orthodox is about, I'm not comfortable with that. So maybe I'll do that, but I'm not comfortable with it. That idea of the comfort is exactly the issue that we spoke about our problems of perception of reality, because our brains create a comfort zone, a place where we can experience ourselves and it had nothing to do with reality around us. The moment you talk about comfort, you're talking about withdrawal into your own brain, right? Okay, so you may have enough perception, I need to do this mitzvah and so on, and okay, I'll ignore the fact that I'm not comfortable with it. Now, that is one approach. That creates a tremendous distance because that has nothing to do with you. Your place of comfort is in your head. These things that you're doing to avoid getting punished or to hope to get sachar or whatever it is, which is orthopraxic, which is the opposite of all of the britot. It leads to no happiness, no fulfillment, and a complete coldness and detachment and alienation from everything that you're doing. Because the whole point is, it isn't me. And that's what I'm struggling with. So to the extent that it's real, I will bend myself to that reality, but I won't identify myself with that reality. That kind of person lives a contradiction, a dichotomy, because he can't really explain to himself. If it's real and I believe in this, I'm doing mitzvahs, how can I live with the way that I feel about everything and not having any response? Right? She goes crazy a little bit. All right. Maybe if I sing enough Carlebach songs or something, Friday night, I'll turn myself on and I'll be somehow in my head comfortable with my distance from the things. All kinds of funny things are done, This group, that group, a trip, this, a study about that, a seminar about this. None of it ever works. It may work for a few minutes in terms of an infatuation, in which the person feels like he's more spiritual because he's singing in a particular way or jumping up and down, and feeling turned on. But all of that is the same infatuation that they're looking for here. Okay, that's one approach, is the dichotomy approach. Now, people that are less honest and can't live with dichotomy, what do? They create a religion. And what that religion does is it creates a place. And as Rashi points out, Dotan is the name of the place. If you shot, have all these other elements in it, in which it's a way of screwing your own mind, in screwing everybody around you. But ultimately, it's a place. Because, of course, that's its deepest expression. It's pshat. The Zohar says pshat is always the deepest. Because pshat means that you've been stripped bare. It's lafshit, what they do to Yosef, right? So when you're mafshit things, we say in modern terms, lafshit is to abstract it completely. So it becomes an abstraction. Okay, so it means a place. A place in the deepest sense is a space in which you live. The creation of a religion co-opts reality. That's its brilliance. It co-opts reality so that it enables me to create a point-to-point reference within my own head about how that is true and what it means to me in terms of its being me because I'm comfortable with it. But what that means is I cannot tolerate any challenge of it to the comfort, except that I won't acknowledge that it's something real that's challenging me. My response will be, I'm not allowed to learn about that, and I'm not allowed to think about that. And that's part of the comfort, is that the reality of this thing means that I'm supposed to live in a world that isn't real. So this becomes now a mile. So that if now I've co-opted the reality and turned it into comfort again. And it's brilliant because it's much less honest, but it doesn't suffer from the breakdowns that modern orthodoxy would have, which is the dichotomy. It's got no dichotomies. There's no separate Torah and Mada. First of all, there is no Mada. That's the simplest. And there's never any new information, which was always the sin in a fundamentalist religion of any kind. Total imperviousness to any data, any facts. They're not comfortable with what it is you already believe. That's another approach. A far more sophisticated approach is meals. And it's on that level that Chazal say, Adam Arishon min. Now, people generally think min means he's a kafir, but that's not the point. A min is the ultimate co-opter. Because what he does, as opposed to a simple religious person, is he has an alternative narrative within his brain that allows facts to come in and to restructure the narrative ad hoc so that he comes up with his own midrash. He comes up with, this is very popular in Midas, right? Let's make up a midrash today, but we'll learn the parsha together. He comes up with his own brilliant insights into the parsha, his brilliant insights, all of which are strange for some reason because they're very detached, they're very academic, they're very cold, and they don't provide anything, but they also don't threaten anything. So on the contrary, he can even make a career out of this. But he will never be able to identify himself with something that's outside of himself, because the deepest desire of the mean, as opposed to the desire of a person who is deeply religious, the deepest desire of the mean is to be impervious to the outside. The deepest desire of the religious person is, if he only could, he would melt into the outside, and that's okay, but so he thinks. And then he's surprised that he's always struggling with his gaifa, and there's, where it's meant to be a bittul hayesh and so on. And somehow or he always finds himself existing in the middle of this, even though he's supposed to be not existing. So there's a little bit of a problem, but it's a sort of a philosophical problem. It doesn't bother him too much as long as he can chuckle sufficiently and so on. So he wants to be connected. The mean searches for disconnection. That's the essential drive. So he needs to co-opt that reality into himself in such a way that nothing could ever be a challenge, because it's always part of a broader philosophy that amazingly subsumes this ultimate reality. Now you think, isn't that a contradiction in terms? No. Because the only thing that makes a contradiction in terms is his experience of this as an ultimate reality rather than as reality. He doesn't see it as ultimate reality. To him, it's reality. To the person that has a complete understanding of Kafalei Harachik, it's a joy. It's a profound connection. It gives him the entire universe. It's the sense of what it is to be an Adam that is Roya Misefer Elamat Seif, and becomes a Gilui of the Aragonos. I mean, it's something in which every last element of his life is seen as, this is a job that needs to be done. That's not a contradiction to me. On the contrary, it's like this profound connectedness to the simple physicality of life, which is amazing to be able to trace back all of the complexity from the beginning of the universe, that it should even have impact on the silly things that appear to be so meaningless that I'm doing it. My relationship to animals and eating and putting on tefillin and saying brachos, and weird, baby, weird. I love this, And so that becomes an endless ride into complexity, which allows him this very deep connectedness to the simplest things, which is exactly where we broke down in the Gina Masha. And this becomes the interrelationship of Misofa Olam. That is the Gilui of the Aragonis. And it's because of that that in the Parsha it leads to Dotan. Dotan allows us to be Mashbiya the Shechina. We co-opt the Shechina. So now HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't argue with us. So nobody can tell him that's the Vayev Koto Aviv, right? And yet, amazingly, the moment that the pressure is turned up, what we find is that among Klal Yisrael, turning up the temperature in terms of that circus story, but it's literally that same idea. You increase the input of energy. And what you do is you gradually strip away the non-realities. And that's why we don't understand. So why is it that Klal Yisrael is so capable of coming together and doing things when there's moments of trauma and people caring about each other? And where does that come from? And why is there suddenly, Yisrael B'tach Hashem on your tanks unless the religious people destroy it, But the initial response is always to reconnect, because underneath it all, it was all a battle for co-opting reality. It wasn't that the ability to see that reality. And in fact, that's the brilliance of the Maharal. The more aware you are of that reality. The greater is your drive to milos, the greater is your drive to avodah zarah, which is religion, whatever, it doesn't matter who the religious figure is. You could call it HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever you want, but it's the same avodah zarah, essentially, in which your view of what a God ought to be, which is amazingly similar to you, it ends up being what it is that you worship. And it doesn't matter what names you call it, obviously. The same thing that they mean in any other direction. Well, it doesn't mean Jesus, Buddha, Yahweh, it's all the same thing. It's basically true in the other direction as well. It really is all the same thing. It's that beautiful Vayeshev of Cook, and how much we owe the Kofrim, the Reform, because they keep reminding us that there is no God, and that's something we must remember. It's a beautiful, beautiful part. Otherwise, you get so caught up in this, this thing in your head that you're comfortable with, that you can talk to, my good old friend God, How you doing today, God? Right? There ain't no such thing. It's the Rambam says. There's no connection between your construct and anything that exists out there in the universe. I don't know who you're talking to, but it sure ain't what we're talking about here. It's beautiful in the Mormon. Zero correlation is the word used. Zero correlation. Brilliant. So, remarkably, what happens in the world in which we live is that the fact that everything has conspired to force us into a search for an ultimate reality. The truth is that as we become closer and closer to fighting that, we become more and more aware of something being wrong. In the end, the things that turn the Shvatim back to Yaakov, and the things that turn Yosef into understanding what the meaning of Miketz Shnatayim really means to him, and the thing that in the end turns Klal Yisrael to the battle of Chanuka, is the closer the world gets to what it is that you identified as reality without it having anything in it for you. So until you meet Yavan, will you wake up please over there? Until you meet Yavan, there is no drive to search for Or. Because your contrived understanding of Or, your subsumed understanding of Or, yourself as Jews, which is Or in your mind, is sufficient. Compromises that are made are just made as compromises with reality. I mean, we're not good enough. God has appointed the Greeks and so on. Okay, fine, what can you do? But the amazing thing is that what was so powerful about Greece was the fact that it had that Or. So every last element in the Parsha has its parallel in Greek, which is amazing, which is why the entire Torah can be written in Greek, and only in Greek. So in terms of the language, in terms of the El Toldot Yaakov Yosef's clear, the whole Greek idea, the beauty of the human form, the nature of Yosef, the expression of concern for philosophy, for meaning of life, for challenge, and for being able to get it right, for the willingness to attack truth, for the acceptance of other people's opinions and exposing oneself to challenge and so on and so forth, for the dialogues, for the universities, for the true love of learning, which is the meaning of philosophy, for the nature of chaverim even. This is the way that Plato defines the relationships. It's chaverus. There's only one chaverus in the world. That's the lovers of emes. Those are the chaverim. I could come into contact with this is suddenly, but it leaves me so cold. It seems to be the same construct. Yeah, what's that? Very good. Very good. It is indeed Platonic. That's very true. So it leaves me cold and I don't know why. And suddenly it's no longer evident to me what the difference is in the reality that I saw and how it is that these people are acting. The closer that Or v'choshev ha'mishtamshin be'irvuvia, the greater is the intensity of my need to figure out what is wrong. It's the fact that Yosef was so close that allowed him in the end to become Yosef HaTzadik with Potiphar and so on. It's the fact that it took him those 2 years. What else do you think he was doing for those 2 years? What do you think that Yaakov was engaged in for those 20 years? Sitting around and moping, or getting deeper into what the problem was about his failures and what had happened, and changing what it meant to be tzaddik, who's in a makom and changes the nature of the makom. So what happens is that what we are more aware of, and the closer we get to the Kafalei and Har-Chagigis, just as Avram Avinu will say, Doresh Elokim, because of the fact that he was mushka b'chukastim, and because of the fact that he was going along with society and could not find an alternative, nothing drove him more to say, but this is not what life is really about. You know that. This is not something, again, that's esoteric. The struggle that each and every one of us here has with a world in which you function, and yet which leaves you alienated, which leaves you cold on every level. Something is wrong. And you know this can't be the entire story. And if it is the entire story, I want out. And this leads to suicide very often. If this is what life is about, I'm not interested. It's ridiculous. How do you know it's ridiculous? Because my experience of the potential of my reality knows that there's something more real, and this is not it. It's an amazing thing. And you will usually identify it literally, verbally, as darkness. You're surrounded by darkness. You're experiencing either a darkness of your own soul in terms of depression, or a world of darkness in which there's just no hope. There's nowhere to go. There's no future. And you're searching for the light. I mean, these are all words that are used all the time by people feeling this way in terms of what that search is. So that the idea of the willingness to tackle reality is completely different than the ability to be aware of the potential of reality. It's the nature of Yisrael, the Kafalei and Har-Chagigis. The challenge is not in knowing that. The challenge is not in seeing that. Everybody is hopelessly aware of that and is driven crazy by it. What am I supposed to do with this world? Pretend that God doesn't exist and pretend that Torah has no meaning? I mean, I could do that because everybody's doing it, but nobody's happy. So where are they going with it? So it's the eitzes that we have, whatever those eitzes are. I'll become a Baal Tshuva. I'll become a min. I'll find my own path. Whatever it is, it's the dealing with that reality. That's the moment that it becomes the eye of the tiger. Then it's not about my ideas about how to deal with reality. It's just about the demands of reality itself. If I walk in, and this is what the Greeks are doing, it has nothing to do with my analysis of, all right, what's the current lineup of Greek forces and Jewish forces that are currently available? It's, you bastard. And then whatever, I don't care. Because I'm not going to live like this. I mean, if I'm ready to commit suicide, I'm certainly ready to kill him, you know. I'm not going to live like this because this is not real. What's the point of living like this? But in doing that, what you've done is you've exposed the Aragonans. Because what you've recognized is that you are willing to live the universe that is you. Not subsume the universe into you, but to recognize the fact that the state of the universe that you are, that's something that you experience as being real. You want to put it into philosophy and so on and so forth? Okay, you could try doing that, but it inevitably will create a breakdown between the immediacy of your existential experience and what it is that you're thinking about. You're welcome to do that, but that has nothing to do with how you need to respond as the eye of the tiger. And that's what the mission is essentially telling you. Yeah. Having az kenamer is a reality that you mustn't let go of. If this is what you experience as the essence of the kofale because this is what it means to be. The moment that you see that, then the interrelationship between the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso and the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, the V'niskav Hashem Levado, that's the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. The Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso, that's Vayivater Yaakov Levado. To put those two things together, as the Zohar says, the 24 with the 25 is something that is very difficult to do. If you try to do it, it's only something that can be achieved because it's the way that you end up. Could you pass me that page, please? It's the way that you end up experiencing reality instead of experiencing it in a place that you make for yourself. And that is the amazing difference. There's no comfort in a place to such a person. The place feels like a cage. The place feels like you feel when you walk into somebody's Bate Midrash, when you drive into Lakewood. It feels like a cage. It doesn't feel like a place. It has no comfort. It has no future. It has no relationship to a world. It's experienced as pure darkness. The fact that you might be able to use that darkness to get a minion, or you could use that darkness to find a chabrus or whatever it is, doesn't change the profundity of the choshech that you feel surrounded. And adarabah, it drives you to search for, okay, so what is not real about this? And what is necessary to discover a reality? That's what happens, essentially, of Chanuka. That question of reality is exactly the solution to the Gid HaNashim. And it's exactly, if you take a look, I mean, this idea of Kviyat Tova, that's the contemporary reality that is most found in it doesn't matter what kind of religion. It's basically all the same. Because it always will search. That's just a question what you're comfortable with. No. And as Moshe pointed out a couple of years ago, there's even a tiferes that's associated with it. There's an aesthetic. Each particular group has an aesthetic of how it is that they feel comfortable being poor. Right? There's different types of horrible ways to live. And each one is an aesthetic. No, seriously, each one is an aesthetic that the people who live in it feel comfortable.
It's some. Also, if you go there, you feel the aesthetic. It makes you feel like
There's a draw in it, which we related to to the Lo Techane, right? But there's always that chaim that makes you feel comfortable. You know, so you go to Vayeshev. Yeah, the ultimate chaim, sure. And that's the deep point of it.
It's 21 hours.
So basically, you'll go into one form of it. It's totally different. But you're certainly not going to lead a kola life in Lakewood the way you lead a life of a religious Jew at Vayeshev. It might as well be two different religions. Each one can say that we value the same kind of things, but you experience the pain of it in a totally different way. You know, so one is a broke down old stone building that you'll feel comfortable in when it's freezing cold and you can sit there over a Gemara and so on. Yeah. I'm saying that, whatever it is, one has a particular type of picture when you walk it, and that will make me, now I feel comfortable because this is the kind of life I lead. I like a picture of the Rebbe on my wall, or I like a picture of Rav Shach or whatever it is. But each one has a particular thing that is the Lo Techadem of Avodah Zarah that defines its comfort level, and that will define what shul a person is going to take. Right? So it's the chain associated with the shul, and the structure of the shul becomes part of that as a place, the type of people who will hang around. the type of drushes that will take place. You got to find your place. Everybody would say,
And what is served for the kids?
yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Written out to reports a conversation by my cousin. We're going to make a movie in it, and we'll serve this type of children and serve that drink, and everybody will come and we'll have it.
Yeah, but I don't know whether that's part of the comfort of the nature. It's the perks. It may be. I look, definitely the horrible foods that are
That's
served.
what made you this.
No, the horrible foods that are served, the foods that kill people, and which are absolutely essential to eat on Shabbos. No, I'm serious. Those are comfort foods. Do you play? They're mental comfort foods. So, but every food, every society is going to have a food that provides a certain smell, and that it becomes part of your ethnic comfort. So this is what my den smells like, my lair smells like. This is what my food smells like. Anybody else who walks in vomits. But this is what I feel comfortable with. And so like the Gemara says, fox never died from the stench of its own den. Well, and that's very, very true. But the point is that it really doesn't matter what particular smell you like and what particular, none of that is nogea. And despite the fact that the chamin of a Moroccan is going to be inedible to an Ashkenazi, and the ridiculous cholent of the Ashkenazi is going to look like it's some kind of a horse food to a Moroccan, But basically it's the same idea. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether your Narei Hadvaot and your belief system is involved in the grandeur of the adventure of taking over Eretz Yisrael, or whether you're Satmar and your entire is the adventure of breaking down the Tzionim or destroying Eretz Yisrael. It's all your comfort level, and by any point in between. And therefore, that question of reality is the essence of the nature of Hakaras Teva and Hudot, because it's the extent at which I am willing, anxious, in love with the reality that comes my way and that I'm able to see. With every new thing that's offered, new data, new mitzvah, new opportunity, new aveda that nobody even conceived of before. Those are the things that are central to Chanuka, because it is actually the essence of the interrelationship between or as a process or as intimacy. Because it's the only way to describe the or hagonos, is that it's intimate. So in the same way that we achieve an intimacy, which is experiential, in terms of the midos of Yosef, it's exactly this, that the or that was once sensual. You see, this is the issue. This is that strange interrelationship between what the Goyim call sexuality and this drive for connectedness, which can come entirely from its lowest points of development. When you see the Aragonis, there's no such thing as low. What does a low mean? Where exactly is the high end and where's the low end? Are the integrated forces at the beginning of the universe, is that the high end or is that the low end? Is that the structure of the dream out of which can come all complexity, or is that nothingness? How do you look at it? It's really just a function of how you look at it. I mean, to talk about the fundamental forces that hold the stars together and that build the galaxies and that allow for complexity, to say that's the low end? Isn't that the dream that includes every possibility? Isn't that the Vayeshev in terms of everything that could be? That is the first instant of creation, as Rashi puts it, as the Rambam describes what it was that Moshe Rabbeinu was given as the sum total of information of Odienina. Are you going to call that low? So somehow or other your hormones are a low part of you. What does that mean, low? That's the most fundamentally connected to what the universe is part of you. You want to cut that out now? And what we want is your philosophy? Your interpretation of the dream of the universe? I don't understand. How did you decide which one was V'niskav and which one was Vayivater? So when you get into Hanukkah, you have no answer to that, because there isn't meant to be an answer. That's the whole point. Once you understand that there's no answer to that, then obviously you sense the totality of your experience of yourself as being the universe's experience of itself. So it's nothing to do with me. And then when Yosef comes along, had he not had that need to say, which exposed him, as we talked about the story of the Melech, you want to get the help of the bureaucrats? So in other words, it's nothing to do with me. I mean, I thought you were interested in my giving you your car back. That's not the point. You're not interested in my giving you your car back. You're interested in having your car. What do I care if you want a car? That's an infatuation. I'll keep it. Now you can literally hear this, right? Why did your kids do this to you? You hear it, So the whole relationship was because you wanted money to go on a trip, And I thought that it was, so I won't give you the money to go on the trip. But it's exactly the same kind of thing. You're playing games? Is that what you're doing? You're leading, on the one hand, this ridiculous life, all involved in, I don't like being in jail. Who the hell cares if you like being in jail? You don't like being in jail. You're only walking on this earth for a couple of years. It matters where you are. There's plenty of people that's all they had in their life was jail. No? And you think at the end of that life, when you ask the person when he's 85 years old, having spent the past 70 years in jail, this is real. So, what do you think about your life? They let him out when he was 85. So what do you think about your life? Every moment spent in jail. He said, oh, it is absolutely amazing. I can't even imagine anything more incredible than having the opportunity to spend those years in jail. That's literally what the guy said. Appreciated every moment. So understand, so what's the big deal? So you don't like jail, so change your perceptions. I don't know, change your perspective. What's the big deal? You come to me to get you out of jail because you're infatuated? You want to talk about you're going to talk to the bureaucrats about getting you out of jail? What is this, a mechanical world that you're looking at? You want to live in a mechanical world? Go work yourself out of jail. I don't understand what you're coming to me for. I don't live in a mechanical world. I live in a reality. You're not part of that reality. Don't talk to me about it then, please. This is like the beware of sadness. It's not what you're here for. That's the point. It's not what you're here for.
Beware of sadness?
George Harrison.
Where were you?
It's an amazing insight. You can say whatever, what it'll do to you. But what's more, it's not what you're here for. That's much more than what it'll do to you. Doesn't matter, so it'll destroy your life, so it'll eat you up. But what's more, that's not what you're here for. You're spending your life in sadness. Fine, so that's exactly the time over here. Once a person gets to this Chanuka, do you understand the incredible difference? It's the most shocking thing in the world between Kviyat Tova and feeling that all of this Avodah that we have to do and the mitzvahs that we have to do are on some level a favor that we do to God. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not what I would come up with. To Chanuka's Shevach Vodot HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Raftet Rivam, Dantet Tinam, Nakamtet Tikvatam. You understand what a shocking development that is? How it takes millennia to get to that moment? I didn't turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, we managed to be able to free the Beis HaMikdash. No, I said, thank you for taking my side. My side? Yeah, damn it, I can't live without that Avodah. Yes, my side. Thank you for caring enough to help me defeat those Greeks. I would have had to do it all on my own. Well, what do you have to do on your own? I mean, if I don't care, what do you care? What do you mean? It's about me. It's not about you, God. I thank you very much for helping me. What an amazing growth from running from Kofar and Archagigas to the moment where you see every opportunity as an opportunity for yourself, and that becomes the Hodoya for the opportunity. It's unbelievable. This is my Nekama, this is my din, this is all about me, and I'm just a nerd. And you allowed the nerds to defeat people that really knew about the bottom line. Zaydim biados ketar, the Zaydim are always on top, you know? It's unbelievable. Tameim are always on top. You know, the Tahora, they've got all kinds of limits on their lives. Bunch of nerds, and you allowed a bunch of nerds to take over the world. I don't think we could have done it on our own. Wow. It's almost a different species. It really is. I mean, one is this primitive, childlike organism that needs to take every real thing and turn it into some little interpretation in their brain so that it's not a problem for them. And the other one is a walking universe who identifies himself as an Adam who could speak to a Beret and say, thank you for not coming my tongue. It's just amazing to me. The change is so striking. How does such a thing happen in the course of just a few thousand years? What a development, right? Of course, Hoda and Halal is the essential opposite of problems in Kafalei Market. It's the celebration of Kafalei Market. It's the gratitude, not as the Goyish gratitude, which is the opposite of Hakaras Teva, but the supreme sense of what it is to be me as a universe instead of me as an optical delusion. That is an unbelievable thing. And because of it, of course, it leads to complete integration of that's the Zohar, but the Chav Dalet Yomim of Kislev and the Chav Hey. And the more that we see that the world is capable of achieving what it achieves in Yavan, the more that has to be subsumed by us. It's not a challenge. It's challenges if we haven't managed it. That's the challenge. And that goes all the way back to the Av Hamon Goyim and to the nature of real Malchus and to the openness to the entirety of the world. I need Yavan. If I didn't have Yavan, I wouldn't have this Targum, I wouldn't have a Sefer Torah, I wouldn't have the same sense of beauty. It's because of that Hurdis' building was so beautiful. It wasn't the Mishkan instructions. What are we fooling? This is what Akeva Shal Esav means. I want that world to be developed. No cynicism and no Monty Pythonism. This is the world. That's the world that I inherit because I am that world. It has nothing to do with all of these ideas of will be stronger than them. It has nothing to do with being stronger. The moment that you expose the Aragonus, everything just simply falls away. Because there is nothing more powerful. And that's, as we said, the real meaning of the God of Ma'aseh Yikid is not simply Latet L'Nachalat Goyim. It's Latet L'Nachalat Goyim on the level of Lo Yachmod Ish Et Artzecha. No one else could even conceive that your things are for them. This is too real. I don't even want it. No, it's exactly that. I don't want to tangle with these Jews. I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's like the Nazis who were driven crazy by the, we shall overcome, so to speak, the Animamins and so on. It drove them absolutely nuts. There's nothing you can do. And this level of that Gilui of unbelievable awe is so powerful that the Kate Sam L'Choshech suddenly becomes clear. Kate Sam L'Choshech doesn't mean it's an arbitrary end of Choshech. Kate Sam L'Choshech means, as opposed to what people think, the greater difficulty in Ma'aseh Bereishis is the achievement of Choshech, not of Or. Or is the given, because existence is pure Or in the sense of the Or HaGonos. The fact that I have to be b'tzadz in that Or and create Choshech, Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech. That's a very difficult thing. Constant work. When I stop working a little bit on Shabbos, there's much more Or. That's the first Deiros. That's the first level of Shalom. But entropy, in terms of Kabbalah, is the entropy of Choshech, not the entropy of Or. And in the end, that Choshech becomes, it has its own built-in end. That's the case of Choshech. Because that's not what it's about. And that's not what the experience of existence can possibly be. So do you know the amount of work that it takes to be involved in Choshech? You know how real that amount of work is? That it's actually used for police interrogation. It's actually what it was that Yosef did. I will drive you crazy to the point where you can't continue to lie. You see that it's just breaking down. Police interrogation does the same thing. But didn't you say before? And then you got to work very hard to make it all, until finally there's just, you can't keep it together anymore. You can't keep it together. You just break down. Okay, I did it. Because I don't know what to say anymore. The lies just fall apart. It's a tremendous job, lying. Minus is a tremendous job. Religion is a tremendous job. Choshech is a tremendous job. All that Yosef needed to do is to keep up in the pressure. What the hell is going on here? Well, let me add another little piece of question. But how did he know? Why did he say that? Why is he doing that? Why did he give us our money back? What is it that he's really planning? What's this crazy occupation with Binyamin? What is going on with this guy? The more your answers stop making sense, the more you have to finally say, oh my God. And that's the moment in which you're ready to admit. Okay, and that's exactly what the Ketzad Choshech is. The more capable you are of desiring to be, the more it's going to break down all of your strategies for trying to co-opt that existence. And therefore, the koach ma'asav yigid la'amo is in the presence of a human being who cannot live in darkness. And that's the point. Look at the rest of you. You're perfectly willing to live in darkness forever. You prefer to live in darkness. All you care about is that it tastes like chicken. It looks like chicken. What do I care what the reality is? I'm not interested in reality. How many people are going to want to know that reality? There aren't any of you. You're playing games with me. I turn up the temperature. Look at the difference. I turn up the temperature and you start knocking your sukkah down. Thank God we're out of this ridiculous thing. And that's the difference. That is the difference. Exactly. That is the difference. An integrated feeling of involvement that is intimate and brokenhearted at being unable to express that intimacy. Oh my God, I have to leave my sukkah, complaining myself. I mean, a little child feels that way. A 3-year-old, we can't eat in the sukkah. And here it's like, thank God we get back into the air conditioner. I can't take this anymore. And that's true about every last aspect of life. It's exactly that. Thank God it's over with. Thank God my davening is over with. Yeah, I'm dying to get to breakfast already. It's taking so long. We're showing us to shut that up because I got to get out of here. And this is my experience of tefillah. How often do we sense the pain of leaving Yom Kippur? Wish it could always be like this. I mean, that's the sense of what it is to be in the presence of reality. And you have a whole world that's perfectly happy, not even to consider it for a moment. It makes no difference to me. You're trying, it makes no difference to me. I don't want that. Don't you understand? I don't want that. I have everything I need. God likes me. He tells me all the time how much he loves me. No problem. God is my partner. And I tithe my way through too. Classic Esav. And so that, what's missing, the more I understand of what's around me, that comes closer and closer to those truths, the more I'm missing that last piece, the more I need to achieve it. And it's because of that, the closeness of minus to the or itself, that's the basis of the whole sugya in the Gemara, of the interconnection of tchelas, of tzitzis, and Neiros Chanukah. Both of them are called tetil. Amazing. Both of them deal with minas. The difference is, and that's the whole Sugyan Gemara. You can take out tzitzit, metila tzitzit, beget lebeget, matlik miner lener. It becomes the same Sugyan Gemara. Because the minas, which the Ramban cautions you of, exposing your tzitzit, is at the very lowest end of the scale. Smallest sea creature, primitive sea creature. And the Oragon, I think that's the maximum. These are two ends of a spectrum. And therefore on Hanukkah, if a person is clearly oimed on Hanukkah, then there's no problem in his wearing his tzitzis out either. Because the minas no longer is a challenge to him. On the contrary, the greater the minas, the more incredible they are, you see. The more you recognize all of this potential, the more powerful is the need for it to be part of a reality rather than living off in nowhere land. And that's why it's the same way that it's heartbreaking. Is it not heartbreaking to see a human being where you, all of a sudden, you see this beautiful person and they're totally screwed up? And you think, and it makes no difference what nation they are, what sex they are, what nothing, what age they are, nothing. It's just, oh, what a shame. Couldn't I do something for that? That's that bakashas ha'or that everybody feels. How is it possible that the potential of the universe should be wasted? That became one of the most effective advertising. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. You have a chance to send this kid to school and to change the whole future of this individual forever and all of the there is. How many people respond to that? And it doesn't matter if he's Chinese, he's black, he's white, he's whatever, I don't care. You're right. I'm a human being. This world's got to mean something. If I let that go and I walk by and I don't provide an education, can't be. It's an unbelievable feeling that we have, a desire to see the world reach its potential. And that is the compromise we give out that everybody can see, and every Jew is like that. Who do you come for to care about these things? Who do you come for to build a hospital? Who do you come to build the universities? Where do you get your donations from? It's an unbelievable thing. All of this comes from that fundamental, deep down connection to reality and to Vayeshev, which in an instant turns a Klal Yisrael into this formidable tool of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, which nothing can stand in front of. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives them Torah, says they want to weaken them, because we wouldn't weaken them with all their studies. They would be a bunch of nerds. They destroy the whole world. They take over everything. There'd be nothing that would be left. Basic Gemara. So we've got to give them the Torah and keep them down. Amazing vision. And that's what it takes. Your different responses to the moral's reality. It's unbelievable. They're becoming the human being who can make it rain. And that's the expression. It's an amazing thing. I told you about that. This wild guy. You should know. To us, it sounds insane. He had Einstein involved in this, right? In which he had these ridiculous boxes, right? I told you about it. This William Wright, in which he thought he could make it rain. He had these devices to make it rain that would gather this kayach, which was the kayach of Yosef. Amazing, right? So there's this, because in those days you have to understand, we're much more sophisticated. You think like, I mean, but this is not that long ago. And in fact, you could still buy these things, by the way. They're available. You know, on the internet, you go on, you ask for an organ box, and yeah, for sure. You know, they did all kinds of scientific experiments. I mean, they didn't know about the placebo effect in those days and so on, but fine, but they did it. They did experiments. Yeah, and Einstein involved in these experiments. It was crazy, you know. So that idea was mamish, like the Avedas Adam bringing rain. He added these things. You notice the strange relationship of the organ to organus. Weird. He made up that word out of Greek. So the org is indeed the same power of orgasm and so on. It's the chaos of life. And then the ending was all gone. It was like ozone. You know, it's like not a really very good scientific, but that's how he built it out of those two Greek words. That's so strange.
This website claims that that's in the Force in Star Wars.
Oh, really?
Well, the Force, I assume that they mean Star Wars. Organ is the universal life force, the basic building block of all organic and inorganic matter on the material planet. Coined by Dr. Wilhelm Reich, Orgon has been called by the great mystics and philosophers with the capital G, either the Chi, the Prana, or simply the Force.
Very cute. But Lamai said the Gilui of the Orgon is the ultimate force. And nothing can stand in front of it, because that kind of reality, what are you going to fight? There's nothing to fight. If you forget it, this is like beyond me. It's that's the Loya. So from this beginning of the understanding from our parsha, the beginning of the Choshech, and understanding that the Choshech experience itself and the struggles within it and the self-created limitations that dissipate and disappear and that are themselves subject by definition, the greater you are in terms of that are more and more going to draw you to the Kate Sam Choshech. That itself is a tremendous gilui of what the what a difference it is to be a human being who will not settle for that choshech. That itself is the next to the final stage in Sefer Bereshis of an expression of what happens to a human being within that context of choshech that inevitably leads to freedom and to awe, and therefore in the end of the year becomes the Ba'im Yashresh Yaakov, the kech that is given them to not be kept down by Mitzrayim. All the things that Avram Avinu was choshesh, what's going to happen? I mean, they're going to forget about all the things that I've achieved. They're going to, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to me, you don't understand. It's not about ideas. This is not about ideas, Avram. The Dorshe Hashem, Zera Avram or Avon, is about Zera Avram. It's not about ideas. And ultimately, you will be shocked. You won't be able to keep them down. So you're saying, but in 1,000 years, not even one ever escaped from Mitzrayim. Yeah? I don't give it a try. Because it comes from within them. And of course, that old story of the 5-year-olds and the arguments with Miriam and her father. And you can give me all the answers in the world, but it's stupid. Daddy, it's just stupid. And that's literally what you find in terms of that gilui of Yisrael and the drive to freedom and to life. All right, it should be a favorite Chanuka for everybody. And hopefully we meet again, maybe Sunday or Monday or something. Try to finish up this year, but it was, oh Lord. Good heavens. It was supposed to be a 1-hour shir, and it turned out into a 2-hour shir. These kind of things happen. It's a good thing we got pizza for all you guys, because you're not places anymore after that much time.
It's 2 hours is what Rabbi estimated last night.
What's that?
2 hours is what Rabbi estimated last night.
3 hours.
It was 11 o'clock, and Rabbi said, if we keep going, we'll take this full long.